Hey, don't rush! Something strange is happening in the village of Kazachya Loknya in the Kursk region. Ukrainian forces have been seen trying to erase their tracks. What exactly did they leave behind? Kursk is no ordinary place. Too many stories have been buried there, and now, one by one, they're beginning to surface. And the most shocking part? Here's what a U.S. commander had to say about the fighting in Ukraine. Keep your eyes on this story. Let's dive deeper into what's happening in Kazachya Loknya, a village that has silently witnessed the war crimes allegedly committed by the Ukrainian military. Alexander Zinchenko, deputy head of the Russian Federal Penitentiary Service for the Kursk region, gave a detailed account of how Russian forces discovered undeniable evidence. Imagine a building that was previously almost entirely intact. The House of Culture in that village, with its windows still in place and its structure well preserved, becoming a deliberate target of Ukrainian militants. This wasn't a random attack, it was a calculated and intentional strike. Why would they target a building still suitable for use? The answer is disturbing: to erase evidence. Evidence of foreign mercenaries who had been stationed there during their failed offensive into Russia's Kursk region. The Kyiv government, which consistently denies the involvement of mercenaries, has now been caught red-handed. They've gone to great lengths to hide the presence of foreign fighters paid by the West to launch attacks on Russian territory. The evidence around the destroyed House of Culture is mounting. Russian forces uncovered large trenches filled with shell casings and massive craters containing vast quantities of NATO ammunition made in the U.S. and Europe. This is no longer speculation. It is an undeniable fact. The advanced weapons promised by the West to Kyiv were not only used in combat, but also to support terrorist activities against Russian territory and to cover up their own crimes. To fully understand the victory at Kazachya Loknya, we must briefly turn back time to when the battle in Kursk was at its fiercest. On March 26, the Russian Ministry of Defense proudly published a story on Telegram about the liberation of Kazachya Loknya. This was the result of a well-planned operation and close cooperation between the 155th Separate Marine Brigade of the Pacific Fleet and the 150th Motorized Rifle Regiment of the Sever North Group of Forces. At that time, units from the Sever Group of Forces continued to advance, pressing Ukrainian troops and forcing them to hastily retreat from settlements and fortified positions. This was not merely about capturing territory, but about gaining strategic advantage. And what did the Russian forces gain on the battlefield? A large number of weapons, including Javelin ATGMs and Western-made grenade launchers, weapons that were supposed to be game changers for Ukraine, but had now become war trophies in Russian hands. This is clear evidence of the effectiveness of the Russian military and the weakness of Ukrainian forces, despite their full support from NATO. During the battles in Kursk, Russia seized numerous trophies and destroyed various Ukrainian weapons, including those supplied from the West. As of April 26, 2025, records show significant Ukrainian losses since the start of the Kursk battles. 412 tanks, 341 infantry fighting vehicles, 314 armored personnel carriers, 2,297 armored fighting vehicles, 2,803 motor vehicles, 647 artillery guns, and 64 MLRS launchers. These numbers speak louder than thousands of words of propaganda from Kyiv. They are proof of the inevitable destruction faced by forces reliant on the West's empty promises. How is it possible that, with so much Western support and advanced weaponry, Ukraine continues to suffer such defeats and losses? Does this suggest that Russian military training and doctrine are vastly superior, or is there a fundamental weakness in Ukraine's strategy and motivation? Ironically, even top Western military officials have indirectly acknowledged Ukraine's weaknesses. General Christopher G. Cavoli, commander of the United States European Command and Supreme Allied Commander Europe of NATO, described the use of drones as a smart tactic, one learned from the battlefield in Ukraine. He admitted that before this conflict, the U.S. Army had only a few large drones linked to major units. Now, they are deploying smaller drones to smaller units, ensuring that lower-level units have more drones at their disposal. This is a veiled admission that the effective use of drones, a tactic developed out of necessity by Ukraine, now needs to be adopted by the West. But Kavoli's acknowledgement didn't stop there. He pointed out a fact that, indirectly, belittles Ukraine. He openly stated that if the Trump administration had withheld military equipment, spare parts, and intelligence support, Ukraine's combat capabilities would have suffered sooner or later. He even said that Ukraine is heavily reliant on NATO intelligence. Without it, they would struggle to identify targets, especially deep operational ones like command posts, logistics hubs, and similar high-value targets that require excellent intelligence. This is a blunt admission of Ukraine's total dependence on the West, and at the same time, an acknowledgement of its inability to operate independently. The question then becomes, why, despite all the support from the U.S. and NATO, despite the claims of advanced weaponry, has Ukraine failed to make significant progress? Why are they still bogged down in the mud of defeat? The answer might lie in an analysis released by the Center for Strategic and International Studies. In a piece by Max Bergman and Maria Snegovaya, one of the scenarios considered is a Russian breakthrough and the collapse of the Ukrainian military. In fact, they acknowledge that Russia's production of drones and missiles has surged dramatically. Ukrainian forces are still exhausted, and Kyiv has yet to resolve its manpower challenges. Ukraine is overwhelmed, struggling to adapt its defenses to Russia's relentless drone attacks. Moreover, the flow of American weapons to Ukraine is gradually decreasing. Air defense systems are particularly at risk, as the incoming U.S. administration is expected to prioritize domestic needs and the growing threat from China. In fact, there is no additional funding for Ukraine in current plans, and ongoing deliveries are reliant on funds allocated under the Biden administration. U.S. approval of requested systems and production prioritization remains uncertain, increasing the risk of delays, misalignment, or setbacks for Ukraine. This paints a bleak picture for Kyiv. It seems that NATO allies are growing weary of using the Ukrainian battlefield as a weapons testing ground, or perhaps it's become a source of trauma for their own weaponry. That's all for today's episode, and thanks for watching.